morning, welcome. We're going to be talking about Connected BIM. My part of Connected BIM will be talking about the different applications that I support here at Microsol Resources. Obviously, Revit is the top of my list, but I'm also heading up the 3D printing department, so love to talk about that, and we'll mention that through the presentation a bit. So, good morning, welcome. Why are we talking about Connected BIM? We need to get the right tools, we need to connect the workflows, and we need to put the project at the center. What we're essentially trying to say is that we have a collection of tools, and if you've seen our webinars before, mine in particular, I've done a couple talking about the Autodesk Architecture, Engineering, Construction collection. So that AEC collection is packed full of great pieces of software. And the ones that I'll be focusing on today are focusing around the great buildings or around our ability to create buildings and to share that information, the design and analysis information throughout your firm and all across your devices. What does that mean? We have the opportunity of connecting these workflows. So we have tools that can work on the iPad, tools that can work on the Android tablets, on your phone, on your desktop, via the web. And we'll talk about them today. Obviously, here's a full list of the latest version of the AEC collection, everything from Revit to Revit Live, all the way through to Recap Pro, well, you hear Stephen talk about next week. We're going to be focusing on Formit, Revit, Dynamo, Live, and we'll talk about how these tools work and how they assist you sharing your information or working any way you want. So whether it be on the tablet, whether it be on the browser, literally fire an application right online and share your information across your A360 drive. You can collaborate with others. You'll be able to, modify geometry and sketch and model and do subtraction, do addition, all along bringing that model directly to Revit. So the real BIM, right? So we'll start in Formit and we'll design the information, share that with Revit, and then be able to manipulate that further in Revit, directly creating construction documents. So you'll see me do a demo of this, but Formit has got a whole bunch of information available, the modeling tools, the Autodesk material library, Insight for energy analysis and visualization. You'll be able to see, this kind of interface where it shows all the information that we've analyzed and shared or created within our models. So just to summarize, Formit 360 Pro is now part of the AEC collection. So these pieces are integrated. We don't have to go from, to get additional subscription or additional functionality. This is all built in. The ability to do real-time collaboration. So we already talked about how Formit is going to be, Formit is available throughout, whether it's on your desktop, on the web, on your tablet, but we're also going to be able to work together. I'll be able to invite my colleagues to see my model and contribute and share. And, if they have Formit Pro, they're going to be able to edit it as well. So you'll see me indicate or illustrate where these, energy analysis and where I could set my location and set the time and, the time of the month, and be able to go ahead and visualize how the solar gain and solar, how the shadows are going to be distributed. So let's jump in. I'm actually going to stop right there and I'm going to toggle back to Formit. So Formit, I'll be running Formit today right there on the on my Windows workstation. It's an installed application that you can run and take all the resources that's available from your system. What I'll start doing is I'll start with a site. Type in an address, visualize the satellite, and decide that, yeah, this is where my project is going to exist, and this is where the satellite imagery I can bring into my Formit project. So let's do that. I'm doing it both at the same time, not only setting my location, but also importing a satellite image of the site so that I can design in context. Here we go. I'll also be able to bring in other modeling, other geometry from Revit or from SketchUp or from AutoCAD or wherever it may be. There's my site. Comes right in. Surprisingly, it didn't align this time. Usually it's been working very well. This information is, like I mentioned, could come from various sources. And one of the first things I'm going to do is I'm going to decide that I want to be able to edit it. I kind of thought it was pretty funny that this model is here, and yet I can't see my site very well. So I get to modify the context if I want to. So I can immediately just start to draw and build geometry. I can change my my context, my access. I could grab geometry and simply push and pull. I could draw right on these surfaces to create various types of geometry. You could see me doing that, right? Move along. I can also connect from Revit or from other applications and export to a format that I can bring in. One in particular is Dynamo. So what I have over here is a Dynamo, an online Dynamo viewer created by some colleagues at Autodesk. Essentially, this Dynamo file was created with a combination of geometries, but Dynamo is all about scripting. So we have the opportunity of creating geometry based on parametrics and based on list of information. And you'll see here that this Dynamo player or viewer mode has already got a bunch of connectors or a bunch of parameters that control, let's say, the height of the tower. So when I make manipulations here, I'll be able to adjust the geometry, whether my tower's on the right, tower's on the left, whether or not I have an offset or not. Pretty neat information to be able to work and play around with different ideas. What I'll be able to do is I'll be able to take that Dynamo model and actually bring it back into Format. So here's a Dynamo connector tool, and all I'll have to do is enter the address of my workspace, and it goes out and communicates with Dynamo, and will allow me to actually come in here. Oh wait, I have to get rid of this piece. That's interesting. Oh, I didn't want to delete that. So we're working inside a group, and I have a bunch of geometry inside that group. But now what I'm going to do is I'm going to communicate with Dynamo and bring that model in from the last modified version so that I can play around with this in context and maybe even continue it and develop it further here. So in this case, I have that model that I brought in. I'm just going to orient it to the site, and voila. Yeah, that's okay. And then place it in the site appropriately. Let me show you a couple of the modeling tools that are available within Format. So now that I have this piece, I'll be able to come in and make manipulations. So one example might be to further explore this surface. So what I'll do is I'll come in and draw a rectangle literally right on the surface. Oh, there we go. Not drawing the way I wanted it to draw initially. Maybe I'll draw it with line work. So this way it actually works on my surface and connects to or aligns with the geometry I already have. And it's not working. There it is. That's what I wanted. But it keeps putting me in and out of the group. So there's different ways of manipulating this surface. Oh my gosh. No pressure. You practice, you practice, you practice. Let's bring it in again. So just with right clicks, you'll see a whole series of tools available for manipulating the geometry. And in this case, I'm going to make sure I'm grabbing the right geometry. I'm going to rotate that. But you see that this rotate gizmo gives me the opportunity of locating where my rotation pivot point is going to be. And what I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to ungroup this thing. So I can edit the group. I could make a unique copy of the group to start playing around with different options, or I could simply ungroup. And in this case, I ungrouped. What the heck? Time to go to a different version of the model. All right. In this version, I already have the same exact object, but I wanted to illustrate a couple of different modes or different methods of modeling. So the idea was edit the group, come in, draw some additional geometry so that I could illustrate some of the cool tools that are available for modeling. Let's try again. We'll do something simple. My idea is not to do something as simple as that, but to play around with a couple of different pieces of geometry that we can kind of illustrate how Format has tools for, for basic modeling, for advanced modeling, meaning that we can do, I could draw geometry to extrude, to join, to subtract, to sweep, to cover, kind of close things up. This is great for taking surfaces that are not closed and uniform and kind of capping them and making sure that it ends up being a solid. Because not only will I be able to export and move this information downstream to Revit for further documentation and analysis, but I'll also be able to send this geometry for a 3D print. So my idea was to simply place a piece of geometry, and nothing seems to be working for me today. So if I come over here, I draw right on that surface. Why doesn't it? There we go, that's working. So just an example of some cool tools within Format are our abilities to take a piece like this, turn it into a group, so that what I'll be able to do is array that group. And this is just one of the coolest things I think you'll get a real kick out of. Something like that. How long is the overall array that I just created? And then be able to go into that one initial piece and modify that further so that any modification that I do is going to affect the rest of the groups. So as I go and say, well, I wanted it a little longer, all of the individual instances of that group are going to be modified. Neat, right? Of course, this wasn't the smoothest illustration of this tools, but my intention was good. All right, so let's go back to the PowerPoint and I'll illustrate a couple examples where I have pre-canned. Examples of geometry. We could do solid geometry, push through, loft and sweep, fillet edges, shell, cover, mirror, and you can see there's different approaches depending on which tool you're using and whether I want edges and faces to be part of that sweep. In this case, the loft. Some other tools that might be useful would be the check model diagnosis. Essentially what I'm doing is I'm checking this model and I'm making sure that the geometry that I'm using is going to be able to move downstream and be useful, for volumetric studies or for moving it over to Revit. So let's take a look at what we have in Revit. I'll grab Revit and I'll move it over so you can see it. So when I'm done playing around with Format, maybe I've been traveling and I was on the road. You can bring that into Revit to further explore and to further share and now document in all kinds of different ways. That opportunity of moving between Format and Revit is an additional plugin. So that comes free, and you could see that I could take a model that I might have been doing, like a massing study that I might have been doing in Revit, send that out to Format, or I could bring in geometry from other applications like SketchUp, or simply import the Format model right into Revit. And it really does it pretty quickly. And once you're there, you're going to be able to continually develop. For instance, I can do my curtain system by phase, my roof by phase, my wall by phase, my floor by phase. And models that I've done in Revit are going to give me more information to study and to go even further. So whether I continue that option in Revit or go back and forth between Format, it might be a good idea to create some design options, right? Design options are our opportunity to create different iterations of designs, to have them visible only when I'm looking at a particular view. So I could have design option 1, 2, or 3 with different iterations that I've been playing around with Format. All along, both Format and Revit have the opportunity of doing energy analysis. So we can send models from Format to energy analysis to do some heating, cooling loads, do some lighting and solar studies. For instance, just like when I'm here in Revit, I can turn on the sun path and look at those shadows and animate that information to say, hey, what do the shadows look like when we're at 7 a.m.? What do we look like when we're at 9 or 10 or 12, depending on where we are in the world. And just like you saw me indicate my location in Format, that information is also coming over to Revit, so we can kind of indicate, what's the best approach? How do we understand the model, and how is it going to contribute to the rest of the context? So let's take a step back and talk about insight. So when you have your models created in Revit or Format, you're going to be able to visualize and interact with your goals and make sure that the model is going to fill those goals and not be using up too many energy. Maybe I might want to design a little bit more shading devices. The best part about it is that processing of this data, your heating and cooling loads and your solar studies are all going to be done in the cloud. And having that information, having insight and Format, all part of your industry collection, you have them available, at your fingertips at any time. Let's talk a little bit about Dynamo. The introduction that I showed was, a little bit simply put, playing around with parameters to stretch and to modify. Dynamo is so powerful. There's different ways that we can do this. So here's an example script of that Format model that I was showing, where the sliders are connected to pieces of geometry and different parameters. So it looked a little simple when we were looking at it online, but really it's kind of complex, and you have the ability to connect parameters and sliders with geometry extrusions and constraints. So that information could be, exported out and manipulated. It could be, brought in from, like I said, all over the place, whether it be DWGs or Format or SketchUp, or basically what you're going to be able to do is provide those graphical and illustrative visualizations. Here's an example of one of the code blocks that basically say, include the math and the parameters that we're connecting between something like a simple slider to a modified piece of geometry. What we like to do also is bring this into a more presentation or a more fluid kind of a tool. So we're walking through the process from concept to sketch to visualization analysis to documentation. And now we also have presentation or visualization. So Revit Live is part of that AEC collection as well. and we'll be able to move from Revit, for instance, and visualize this information going across. Not only are we going to be able to see beautiful presentations with lighting and materials, but you'll also be able to put on a headset and convert that directly into a live virtual reality presentation. And I have one that's just fantastic. I can't say anything more about it except you're going to love this. So let's take a look at Villa Martini. It's one of the best live presentations, Revit live presentations. So what I'm looking at right now is a building that was created in Revit. Maybe it originally was sketched out in Format, but when we import it from live, what we're basically doing, and let me just show you a Revit connector. We go over to Revit and we're in our model and we send it to live. That literally starts communicating. It uploads your model to the cloud. It processes that new presentation and allows you to download it. So what I'm in right now is really just a viewer with all the tools available. So for instance, one of the tools that are just phenomenal for doing the visualization is playing around with the sun. So we can move the sun across the sky based on the location of our project, and you see that the whole experience, the whole visualization of this project really works really well. So here we are at 2 a.m. I guess the party's just getting started. Lights are on. Sky is dark with some stars. But you can't really explain the project and how the client is going to experience this project any better. So those are just some tools to help move around. Right now I'm in what's called a tap and go mode. So I'll be able to point my cursor anywhere throughout the model and the application will bring us there. I don't know how it managed to walk on water there, but normally it takes a path that's logical. So for instance, I'll bring it over here and then I'll navigate around. And this time I'm going to pick a place up in the second floor. So just by putting my cursor there, the presentation knows how to navigate around. Why did it decide to go outside? I'm not sure. Up the stairs, and there we are on the second floor. A couple of different opportunities for materials, a couple of opportunities for different types of people, for presentation, whether they be, photorealistic or, more accurate, more diagrammatic. All I'm doing is picking places and the logical path of, well, except for this one. Again, how am I walking on water? All right, maybe we could fix that. Then we could also go for different preset views. So I can go to the kitchen, I can go to the dining room, I can go to the den. Like I said, I don't think anybody's going to argue about this quality of presentation and how it's really going to be useful. That's just part of the connected workflow. So let's jump back down. Revit Live is, again, like I mentioned, powered by the cloud and really gets a really intuitive, easy to navigate opportunity for your presentation to the client. There's an editor to compose what you just watched, and that editor allows me to place different components, different lights, different materials, and prepare the project file for viewing. And when it's available for viewing, you could send that link to any device. And as I mentioned, the VR. So put a headset on and you can navigate immersively, with the same kind of click and push tools to bring me to different locations. So let's just make sure we understand that these tools are available on your desktop, on the mobile devices, and they're using the cloud to process all of the heavy work. So we understand that when I'm working in Format, I can work on my desktop. I could also save it to A360. That's my cloud destination for file storage and sharing. Inside 360 is also going to use all of the unlimited, computational power of the cloud. And I think you're already familiar with rendering in A360. So from Revit, we know that we can simply just open up a model, go to our View tab, and render in the cloud. And I've created a bunch of different renderings, both pseudo color for lighting analysis, as well as photorealistic. And here's a couple of examples. So not only are they beautiful still images, but they're also navigatable kind of orbitable panoramic views. Just some great examples. Let me step out and go to a photorealistic one, not a photorealistic one, one of the energy analysis ones. Wait, where is it? I know I had one. All right, my bad. The pseudo-color or energy analysis ones are essentially saying, okay, let's look at lighting and how that scene is going to be illuminated, where the hot spots and where the cold spots. I'll work on a different presentation for that. Don't know where it went. So this is what we just illustrated, we just talked about. Some beautiful renderings, all done in the cloud, where you can continue to use your computer, desktop computer, for other processes. Here's one. That's what I was looking for. Meaning that it's more than just a pretty picture. This is an example of a solar study. So with the proper graph to illustrate, lighting lumens or lighting energy, you can kind of get a real good example to say, we're really thinking about how this space is going to be lit, and what kind of solar gain we're going to have in the space. In addition to all those tools that we talked about, you're also going to have, along with the AEC Industry Collection, structural analysis for Revit, meaning that your model is not only going to be used for presentation and for concept and for documentation, but also for your ability to really understand how this building is going to withstand, whether it be wind loads or snow loads, or just simply the people occupying and the equipment. So some great visualization tools within this collection. Again, here's the list of products that come with the AEC Industry Collection. I've only touched on a few. Tune in for the other Connected BIM webinar, where we illustrate InfoWorks and recap.
One thing that I think might be interesting to point out is just if you want me to talk a little bit about licensing and how AEC Collection works. It's probably been mentioned that you might have heard of it at some point, but since the AEC Collection includes all these products, they will be assigned to your end user as a single user, or accessible via license manager if you're working with a multi-user. One thing to note for some of the topics or some of the applications that Roger touched upon, especially any of the ones that require a login, such as Formit Pro, you'll want to make sure that as an administrator, you go in and you assign end user access to that specific cloud service. So unlike the single user or multi-user, there are a number of applications that still require you to log in to use Formit Pro, especially the web-based one is an example of that. You can still access it, the free version regardless, just play around with the tool. But the things that you'll be missing are some of the energy analysis tools and the Dynamo plugin. One question did just come in. I'll read it out and then we can take a look at it. When you install Revit, will you be able to use the structural, civil piping, etc.? Is it all in one? Would you like me to go answer that one as well? Yeah, sure. So absolutely, the AEC Collection includes Revit, includes Formit, includes in fact all the applications that Roger certainly touched upon. It also does include Civil 3D and the gravity flow utilities and network pressure utilities that are part of that application. So if you have any questions specifically about that, tune in next week where I'll briefly touch upon it. If you're looking more into mechanical systems, right? I'm not sure if the question related to piping was one associated with civil work or mechanical work, but Revit MEP, or I should say the mechanical aspects of Revit are included in the full Revit application. So I'm going through some more questions here. What is the cost structure for all of these different elements, Insight, Live, etc.? I guess since I'm on the topic, I'll jump in and point out that everything is included in the AEC collection. So you can certainly reach out to Brandon and get a little bit of understanding of the differences between the costs associated with a single user and a multi-user and different subscription lengths, but everything's included in this one product. So the AEC collection includes every single product that you've seen here, including the ones that I'll be pointing out next week when I talk a little bit about how building it, basically the vertical and horizontal aspects of engineering and architecture work together. So I'll have a focus more on the infrastructure side of things, but certainly we'll have some topics available for architects and structural engineers. And I think that answers another one of the questions, which is Format Pro available in the suite users without changes to current licensing? I guess with that question, as I've said before, the Format is included with the AEC collection. There are two flavors of Format, just for those of you who may be curious. There is a free version that includes all the basic and advanced modeling tools that you see Roger working with at the moment. In fact, it parallels all the same exact tools that you'd find in a product like SketchUp, but you get the advantages of being able to work directly with your other Autodesk products within your AEC collection. The Pro version includes a number of additions, right? So the Pro version includes the ability that Roger showed early on, which is the ability to bring in satellite imagery from BIM sources. It allows you to tie in some of the Dynamo scripts that Roger illustrated, allowing you to create a massing study that brings in all the parameters that were built into the Dynamo model, and that allow you to play with them in real time inside of Format. It also includes the ability to run an Insight, right? The ability to do an energy analysis workflow directly from Format into Insight 360. So those are the differences between the two. Format Pro is included inside of your AEC collection. So as long as you've assigned user access via your subscription site, manage.autodesk.com, the users will be able to access all the Format Pro features when they log in. See what some of the other questions may be. Can you talk about how materials export from the Revit model to Revit Live, and if you have any additional control over material appearance in Revit Live? Do you want to grab that one? Or
I'm currently in a Revit viewer, but you're going to be able to manipulate materials further. All these products from the collection are all using the same Autodesk material library. So although I don't have the opportunity to edit them where I am right now, you're going to be able to, in the Revit Live editor, be able to manipulate the materials and add materials, create new ones, duplicate them, and create really any kind of material you can imagine, as you could see in this great example.
Yeah, and to add to that, a lot of the Autodesk products within the suite all utilize the same material library. There's a low, a medium, and a high quality, depending on what it is you'd like to use, depending on the context of how you're going to show that application. So certainly, if you've used any of the Revit applications, such as 3S Max or Revit, material library is the same for Revit. For Revit Live, and it translates directly in that context. Let me take a look at some of the other questions because I did see a few pop up. Let's see. Can you talk about materials? Building design suites, is all this included in those? So the building design suite being asked about is a continuation of the building design suites that have existed for a number of years now. There are a lot of overlaps. All the same products that existed in the suites up until the 2017 version, where perpetual licenses ended for those products, are still included, or I shouldn't say they ended because you can still maintain them, but the products listed haven't changed, right? So all the same products that existed in the suites existed in the most current iteration of that suite, which is the 2018. Unlike the suite, though, Roger, do you have that slide with the products in the AC collection? Some of the products that Roger's mentioned, such as Revit Live, Format, those are, and Insight 360, those are all examples of products that are actually, I might retract the Insight 360, but certainly Format and Revit Live are not part of that. A lot of the other products, like anything related to the energy analysis, if I'm not mistaken, were included at some point, but Andre, I'll get back to you on that specific question because there is a little bit of a overlap between the two products. Most of the cloud stuff is what was included in the AC collection that you won't find in the suite, but because energy analysis was already included in the suite, it may have carried over, but I'd have to get back and answer that one to you. I'll shoot you an email personally. One other question that came up.
Materials in the building design suite?
I don't have that handy because Autodesk pulled that off of their website because it's no longer available. So you may, we have to go back and look. I think on Microsol Resources website, we have a list on there if you want to go take a look while I answer the other questions. But it included a lot of mostly desktop applications, AutoCAD, Navisworks, 3ds Max, Revit, etc. One of the questions that popped up, if you want to also show on your screen, Roger, I'll answer it verbally, and then you can maybe just show where that button is. One of the questions is, can you have more than one person work inside of Format Pro? And there is a collaboration workspace where you can invite users to share and start a collaboration session. So where Roger's pointing up at the top there, you can see that you can start a collaboration session, provide a link. And because I think Roger is showing, are you showing the desktop version or the
desktop version?
Yeah, Roger. Yep. So one of the advantages of Format Pro is you get a desktop and a browser-based version. In both scenarios, most pointedly the browser-based version, you can start a collaboration session where another end user could be using Format Pro on their end to collaborate on a AXM file, right? One of the proprietary formats for Revit, for Format, and access that in real time. So it's very easy to collaborate have multiple users modeling and accessing the same Format session so that you can experience that together. Maybe what Roger is doing is maybe sharing
I was going to send you. I was going to invite you.
Yeah, fair enough. I'll see if I can jump in on that. A couple of questions. Recap has a license cost for software plus a cost per use. Is Live Insight similar, or do you just pay once? I'm not sure what that question is, aside from maybe some of the cloud-based services. Again, Live and Insight don't have a cost associated outside of the AEC collection cost. What I can say is that typically with some of the cloud services, there are some services or aspects of the services that are free. For example, Revit Live right now doesn't have any cost or cloud credits associated with producing a scene. Whether or not that changes, we don't have any information on, but certainly if you have a Revit Live or AEC collection subscription, you can produce those panoramas and all the things that Roger showed with you as part of your collection. I'll double check that, but I'm fairly certain that's the case. With the recap, Andre, again, I can maybe answer that question for you offline. Aside from the licensing cost, see what other costs you may be associated with that. There are different pricing structures like a Recap and a Recap Pro, if that's what you were implying. The version that's included with the AEC collection is the Recap Pro. Same goes for Format. There's a free version, as I mentioned earlier, and a pro version.